My name is Emily Carter, and for most of my life, my parents told everyone they had two daughters. What they really had was one golden child and one spare. That was me. Growing up, my sister Rachel never had to explain herself. If something went wrong, it was never her fault. If something went right, it was always because of her. I learned early that in my family, love wasn't unconditional, it was ranked. Still, I believed education would save me. I was the quiet one, the disciplined one, the kid who stayed up late with anatomy flashcards while Rachel partied and posted filtered photos about her future in healthcare. I didn't talk much about my dreams because no one ever asked. But I had one, medical school, and I worked for it like my life depended on it, because in a way, it did. When I was accepted, my parents hugged me for exactly 5 seconds. My father said, "That's nice, Emily," the same way someone comments on the weather. Rachel smiled too widely and said, "Wow, med school? That's intense." I didn't notice then how her eyes hardened. I should have. Medical school broke me down and rebuilt me from the inside out. I missed holidays. I missed birthdays. I missed sleep. But I stayed. I pushed through. I passed every exam. I earned my place. And then, halfway through my second year, my parents stopped calling. At first, I thought it was stress, or distance, or life. I left messages. I sent texts. No replies. Weeks passed, then months. Finally, I drove home unannounced, still wearing my hospital badge, still smelling like antiseptic and exhaustion. My mother didn't hug me. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes cold, and said, "Why didn't you just tell us the truth?" I didn't understand the question. That's when my father stepped in and said the sentence that split my life clean in two. "Rachel told us you dropped out of medical school." I laughed. I actually laughed, because it was so absurd. I pulled out my ID, my schedule, my exam scores. None of it mattered. They had already decided. They believed her without asking me a single question. Rachel stood behind them, silent. No tears, no denial. Just that same tight smile. My mother said, "We can't support lies, Emily." My father added, "We're done enabling failure." That night they cut me off, financially, emotionally, completely. No calls, no holidays, no explanations. 5 years of silence. They didn't come to my residency graduation. They didn't come to my wedding. They didn't even send a card. I grieved them while they were still alive. And somewhere between my third overnight shift and my fourth year of residency, I stopped being their daughter. I became something else, something they never bothered to see. And 5 years later, that lie was about to drag us all into the same emergency room. The first year after they cut me off was pure survival. I moved out of my tiny apartment near campus and into a cheaper place farther from the hospital, 40 minutes each way, unpaid overtime stealing what little sleep I had left. I sold my car and took the bus. I lived on meal prep containers and whatever was left in the resident lounge after midnight rounds. When people talk about resilience, they make it sound heroic. It wasn't. It was lonely. Every time my phone buzzed, my chest tightened. Every time it didn't, something in me hardened. I stopped checking social media because Rachel still posted family dinners, smiling holidays, captions about grateful hearts. I was erased from the pictures like I had never existed. What hurt most wasn't the money. It was the certainty that they never questioned her. Not once did my parents call the medical school. Not once did they ask for proof. They believed a lie because it was easier than admitting they might be wrong about who their daughter really was. So I stopped trying to prove myself. I put that energy where it mattered. Residency nearly broke me. 16-hour shifts, trauma after trauma, watching people die while their families screamed in the hallways. I learned how to compartmentalize pain so efficiently that sometimes I scared myself. I learned how to speak calmly while my hands worked fast. I learned how to lead a room full of chaos without raising my voice. I became good, very good. When my wedding day came, I didn't expect them to show up. But when I walked down the aisle and saw 2 empty seats where my parents should have been, I still felt it. Sharp, immediate, humiliating. My husband squeezed my hand and I smiled because I refused to let them take another milestone from me. That night, after the guests left and the adrenaline wore off, I cried quietly in the bathroom so no one would hear. I wasn't crying because they weren't there. I was crying because I finally accepted they never would be. By year 4, something shifted. I stopped feeling abandoned and started feeling free. No more waiting, no more hoping, no more rehearsing imaginary conversations where they apologized and said my name like it mattered. I focused on becoming the kind of doctor patients trusted instinctively, the one families clung to when everything went wrong. When I passed my boards, I didn't tell anyone except my husband. When I was offered an attending position at the same hospital where I trained, I celebrated with takeout and exhaustion. I framed my certification and hung it in my office, not as proof for them, but as a promise to myself. I told myself I was done with my past. I believed it. Then, one night during a routine shift, the overhead speaker crackled. Code Blue, Emergency Room, Trauma Bay 3. I grabbed my coat and moved on instinct, already running through protocols in my head. Another patient, another crisis, another life hanging in the balance. I didn't know yet that the name I was about to hear would pull me straight back into the lie that destroyed my family. I didn't know yet that 5 years of silence were about to end in the worst possible way. And I definitely didn't know that when I stepped into that trauma bay. I wouldn't be stepping in as a daughter. I'd be stepping in as the only thing they had left. The words Code Blue usually sharpen me. They flip a switch in my brain. Focus in, emotion out. I don't panic. I don't hesitate. I move. Years of training carved that response into my bones. So when I pushed through the ER doors that night, I expected the familiar chaos, the alarms, the shouting, the metallic smell of blood and antiseptic. What I didn't expect was silence. Not total silence, but the kind that settles when something personal walks into the room. The charge nurse looked up from the chart, her expression shifting the second she saw me. Her mouth opened, then closed again. That alone made my stomach tighten. Attending on call, I said automatically, snapping on gloves. What have we got? She hesitated, just a fraction of a second too long. Then she said the name. Rachel Carter, 32, unresponsive on arrival. For a moment, my body kept moving while my mind stopped. Rachel, my sister, the golden child. 5 years of silence collapsed into a single word. I felt it like a physical hit, sharp, breath-stealing, but I didn't show it. I couldn't. Every eye in Trauma Bay 3 was already on me. Residents, nurses, a respiratory therapist gripping an ambu bag too tightly. They were waiting for leadership. They didn't know the history. They didn't know the lie. They only knew that the attending physician had just heard the patient's name and hadn't flinched. Vitals, I said. BP unstable. Oxygen sat dropping. Possible internal bleed, someone answered. I stepped closer to the gurney, and then I saw her. Rachel looked smaller than I remembered. Pale, fragile, tubes everywhere. The confident smile she'd worn while destroying my life was gone, replaced by something raw and human. For half a second, just half, I saw the sister I'd once protected. Then I saw my parents. My mother stood frozen near the wall, hands clenched together so tightly her knuckles were white. Her eyes met mine, and filled instantly with tears. My father looked like someone had knocked the air out of him. He took a step forward, then stopped, like he wasn't sure he was allowed. Emily, my mother whispered. That was the first time I'd heard my name in 5 years. The room felt suddenly too small. I didn't respond. I turned back to the monitors, to the labs, to the ultrasound probe waiting in a nurse's hands, because in that moment, I understood something with terrifying clarity. If I reacted, if I faltered, they wouldn't see a doctor. They'd see a daughter, and daughters could be dismissed. Let's move, I said, my voice steady. We're losing time. My father opened his mouth, then closed it again. For the first time in my life, he didn't know what to say to me. The resident leaned in and whispered, "Do you want someone else to take lead?" I looked at him, calm and unblinking. "No," I said. "I've got this." And as I took control of the room, issuing orders, directing hands, stabilizing what could still be saved, I felt something shift deep inside me. Not anger, not fear, power. They had erased me. They had believed a lie. They had walked away. And now, in the most critical moment of their lives, the person standing between Rachel and death was the daughter they chose to lose. The ER ran the way it always does. Fast, loud, unforgiving. Orders echoed back to me. Fluids, imaging, blood. Someone called out numbers. Someone else swore under their breath. I moved from one task to the next, like muscle memory had taken over, because it had. But I could feel my parents watching me, not like before. Not with judgment or disappointment or that distant superiority they used to wear so comfortably. This time, they watched me like strangers watching a storm roll in. Awed, afraid, powerless to stop it. "CT is ready," a nurse said. "Take her now," I replied. I want a full abdominal scan, page surgery, and keep blood on standby. My mother gasped softly. Emily, is she? I didn't look at her. I couldn't afford to. She's critical, I said clinically. We're doing everything we can. That was the most I gave them. Not reassurance, not comfort, just the truth. As the gurney rolled out, my father finally stepped closer. He looked older, smaller. The man who once told me he was done enabling failure now stood in front of me like a student who'd missed the lesson and was terrified of the test. I didn't know, he said quietly. We didn't know. I paused. For 5 years, I had imagined this moment, what I would say if they ever stood in front of me again. I thought I'd scream, or cry, or unload every sleepless night and unpaid bill and empty holiday. Instead, I felt nothing. You didn't ask, I said. That was it. No accusation, no raised voice, just a fact. My mother broke. She covered her mouth with both hands, tears spilling freely now. We thought, Rachel told us. She lied, I said, finally meeting her eyes. And you chose to believe her. The words landed hard. I saw it in their faces, the realization settling in, slow and devastating. The weight of 5 years pressing down all at once. A nurse cleared her throat nearby, uncomfortable. This wasn't a family reunion. This was an emergency department, and I was still in charge. I need to get back to work, I said. My father reached out instinctively, stopping himself halfway. Emily, please, if there's anything... I turned fully then, and for the first time they saw me clearly. Not the quiet daughter, not the disappointment, not the afterthought. They saw the attending physician in front of them, board-certified, composed, unshakable. I'm doing my job, I said, just like I've been doing for years, without you. The surgeon arrived, scrubs already on. We reviewed the scans together. Internal bleeding, complicated but survivable, if everything went right. As Rachel was prepped for surgery, my parents were escorted to the waiting area. They looked back once, as if expecting me to follow. I didn't. I stood there, watching the doors swing shut behind my sister, feeling the finality of it settle in my chest. They had finally seen who I became, but seeing me didn't mean they could have me back. And as I walked back toward the nurses' station, I knew something else was coming, something far harder than anger or regret. The truth. Surgery took 4 hours. 4 long, merciless hours where time stretched and snapped back like a rubber band. I monitored Rachel's status from the board while running consults on 2 other patients, my mind split cleanly in half, one part clinical, the other braced for impact. Because I already knew something my parents didn't. Rachel's chart told a story. And it wasn't a good one. When the surgeon finally came out, mask dangling at his neck, his expression was controlled but serious. She's stable for now, he said. But this wasn't a random collapse. My parents surged forward. My mother clutched her purse like a life preserver. What do you mean? He glanced at me instinctively, professional courtesy. I nodded once. There are signs of prolonged neglect, he continued. Missed follow-ups, ignored symptoms, medications she was prescribed but never took. My father frowned. That can't be right. Rachel's always been so careful. The surgeon hesitated, then said the words that cracked everything open. She told intake she doesn't have a primary care physician, no regular monitoring, no consistent treatment plan. My mother shook her head, frantic. She said she was seeing specialists. She said she was managing it. I felt something cold and heavy settle in my chest. There it was again. The lie. Different shape. Same damage. Later that night, while Rachel slept under sedation, I reviewed her file in detail. Insurance gaps, missed appointments. Notes from urgent care visits that ended with patient declined follow-up. Patterns don't lie. Rachel hadn't just lied about me. She'd been lying about herself, and my parents, once again, had chosen belief over verification. When I stepped into the waiting room, they stood up immediately, hope flickering in their eyes like I could fix everything just by being there. I didn't sit. She's stable, I said. But this didn't come out of nowhere. My father's jaw tightened. What are you saying? I'm saying this was preventable, I replied. If she'd been honest, if she'd followed through, if someone had asked questions. My mother's voice broke. She told us she was fine. I met her gaze, steady and unflinching. She told you I dropped out of medical school too. Silence. Not the awkward kind, the devastating kind. My father sank back into his chair like his knees had finally given out. My mother stared at the floor, shaking. I didn't know, she whispered. You didn't want to know, I said quietly. That's when it hit them. Not all at once, but enough. The pattern, the favoritism, the cost. They had trusted the same voice every time, and every time someone else paid for it. Rachel survived surgery, but the lie that built her world didn't. And as I walked back toward the ER, back to the work I'd chosen, the life I'd built without them, I understood something with brutal clarity. This wasn't about revenge. This was about consequences. And for the first time, they were finally facing them. Rachel woke up just before dawn. The ICU was quiet in that strange, suspended way it always is between night and morning. Monitors humming, lights dimmed, reality softened just enough to make people brave enough to speak. I was reviewing labs at the nurses' station when my pager buzzed. Patient awake, asking for family. I took a breath before I went in. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew this moment would change everything. Rachel's eyes fluttered open as I stepped into the room. For a split second, relief washed over her face. Then she saw me, and something else replaced it. Fear. Emily? Her voice was thin, fragile, unfamiliar. What are you doing here? I didn't answer right away. I checked her vitals, adjusted the IV, did everything a doctor does to buy time when words are heavier than medicine. I'm your attending physician, I said finally. You're stable. Surgery went well. She swallowed. Her eyes flicked to the doorway. Where are Mom and Dad? In the waiting room, I said. They know everything. Her brow furrowed. Everything? Yes, I replied calmly. Your missed appointments, the medications you didn't take, the fact that you never had the specialists you told them about. Her lips parted, then closed again. I watched it happen, the calculation, the instinct to spin, to cry, to redirect, the lie forming. Emily, I was just overwhelmed, she said quickly. You know how it is. I didn't want to worry them. I thought I had more time. I leaned against the counter, arms folded, not defensive, just done. You said the same thing about me, I said. That I dropped out, that I failed. Her eyes filled with tears. I didn't think it would go this far. It always does, I replied, when no one questions you. She looked away. That's when my parents came in. My mother rushed to Rachel's bedside, brushing hair from her face, whispering her name over and over like a prayer. My father stood back, watching, really watching, for the first time. Rachel started crying immediately. I'm so sorry, she sobbed. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I didn't want to disappoint you. I stayed silent, because this wasn't my conversation to lead anymore. My father spoke instead. Why didn't you tell us the truth? He asked. Rachel opened her mouth, and then she stopped, because for the first time in her life, there was nowhere to hide. The chart was real. The surgery was real. The consequences were real. I thought you'd still choose me, she whispered. The room went still. My mother's hand froze in Rachel's hair. My father closed his eyes. And in that moment, everything they had refused to see came into focus. They hadn't just enabled lies. They had rewarded them. I turned toward the door. Rachel called after me, her voice cracking. Emily, please. I looked back once. I saved your life, I said, but I'm not saving you from the truth. Then I left them there, together, finally facing what they'd built. They didn't ask right away. For 2 days after Rachel woke up, my parents hovered in the ICU like ghosts who didn't know where they belonged. They brought coffee they didn't drink. They whispered to nurses who couldn't answer their real questions. Every time I passed through the unit, I felt their eyes on me, hesitant, searching, afraid. They didn't stop me. They didn't demand anything. That alone told me how much had changed. On the 3rd day, my father finally asked if we could talk, not as my superior, not as the man who once cut me off without blinking, as a father who no longer knew his place. We sat in a quiet consultation room, the kind with bad lighting and uncomfortable chairs, designed for difficult truths. My mother folded her hands in her lap like she was waiting to be judged. We were wrong, she said immediately. Her voice trembled. About everything. I didn't respond. I had learned the difference between apology and relief-seeking, and I was no longer interested in making them feel better. My father cleared his throat. We need your help, he said. There it was, the sentence I'd been bracing for. With Rachel, my mother added quickly, she'll need long-term care, follow-ups, someone to make sure she doesn't fall back into old habits. I looked at them, really looked. 5 years ago, they had turned their backs on me because it was easier than questioning their favorite child. They missed my graduation, my wedding, my entire becoming, and now they wanted me to step back into the family as the responsible one, the fixer, the safety net, the role I'd always played. I already helped, I said calmly. I did my job. I saved her life. My mother's eyes filled with tears. But you're her sister. I nodded once. And that didn't matter when you cut me off. Silence pressed in around us. My father leaned forward. We can't lose you again. The words landed heavier than he intended. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping softly against the floor. You didn't lose me, I said. You let me go. They looked at me like I'd struck them. I'm not cutting you off, I continued. I'm not punishing you. I'm just not stepping back into a role that almost destroyed me. My mother reached for my hand. I stepped back before she could touch me. I'll give you information, I said. Referrals, resources, names of excellent physicians who can care for Rachel. My father's voice broke. But not you? I met his eyes, steady. Not me. Because for the first time in my life, I was choosing myself without guilt. And as I left that room, I felt something unexpected. Not triumph, not revenge. Peace. Rachel was discharged 10 days later. By then, the hospital had returned to its usual rhythm. New emergencies, new faces, new stories unfolding without pause. Life doesn't wait just because yours cracked open. I wasn't there when they wheeled her out. That wasn't cruelty. That was boundary. I had arranged everything I promised: specialists, follow-up care, a case manager who wouldn't be fooled by charm or tears. I sent the information to my parents in a clean, professional email. No emotion, no commentary, just facts. They didn't reply right away. When they finally did, it was my mother. Thank you. We understand now. Understanding always comes late, I thought. After the damage is done. The last time I saw them was a week later. I was finishing rounds when I spotted them near the exit, standing awkwardly, like visitors who weren't sure they were allowed to stay. My father's shoulders were slumped. My mother looked smaller somehow, like she'd aged a decade in a month. They didn't block my path. They didn't ask me to sit. My father spoke first. We just wanted to say goodbye, properly. I nodded once. My mother's eyes searched my face, desperate for something: permission, forgiveness, reassurance that they weren't terrible people. I didn't give her any of it. I'm glad Rachel is recovering, I said. I hope she follows through this time. My father swallowed. We failed you. The words were quiet, unpolished, real. And that was when I knew something important. An apology doesn't erase consequences. I accept that you're sorry, I said. But that doesn't mean things go back to the way they were. My mother's lip trembled. Does that mean you're done with us? I thought about the empty seats at my wedding, the graduation photos without parents, the nights I cried alone in silence because I refused to beg. I'm done trying to earn love that should have been given freely, I said gently. That's all. They didn't argue. They didn't beg. For the first time in my life, they respected my boundary. As they walked away, my father turned back one last time. You became someone extraordinary, he said, even without us. I waited until they were gone before I exhaled. I didn't feel broken. I didn't feel victorious. I felt whole. Because this wasn't a story about revenge. It was a story about survival, about truth, about choosing yourself when your own family refuses to choose you. And if you've ever been the one who was cut off, erased, or sacrificed for someone else's comfort, I want you to know this. You don't owe anyone access to the life you fought to build. Sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is walk away with your head high and your truth intact.